On September 11th, the world changed. I could walk the World Trade Towers blindfold and was so impactful. There was no opportunity for work, and continued to pray for what the Lord had next for me. And I could not find a job. And for the first time in my life, God showed me that I wasn't in charge. I immediately realized, you don't trust God. I could not trust God enough to take that step forward. So here I was, desiring to go deeper in my faith, and yet I really didn't trust God. And that was the beginning of the stripping that God had to do for me to bring me to a point where I was willing to surrender. And that intentional surrender process was to lay before God all of the things that I had built, all of the things that I was putting above Him. And if I had tried to hang on to them, the price would have been very high, because I would have been fighting God to get them back. I'm Rick Allen. I'm a sinner saved by grace. I'm also the chief executive officer of an organization called Medsend, and I've been with Medsend for 15 years.
Awesome. And what maybe have you struggled with and placed your hope in other than Jesus since you started following Him?
My own skills and my own intellect, my own ability. I have, at various times certainly in my professional life, I've leaned on them. I've recognized our Lord in the middle of it, but I did it without really a grateful or thankful heart, because I was highly ambitious. Professionally, I had a lot that I wanted to accomplish, and I set out to accomplish it. And by and large, I was successful.
And when did you first maybe start realizing that Jesus was asking you to lay something at His feet?
I had worked my way into a position that took me about 20 years. I came right out of college and went into the computer software business, which is at that time was very early. It was primarily controlled by the hardware companies, and an entity as a software company was just being developed at that time. And I had a wonderful career in the software business. And I came right out of college and went into sales, and I worked my way up through the sales and marketing ranks to where I had found myself as Vice President of Global Sales and Marketing for a pre-IPO internet-based software company, and we were about to go public. So I had reached the pinnacle of where I was trying to get myself over a period of about 18 years. And honestly, I'd done it mostly on my own strength, not recognizing the success primarily is from our Lord. And I got to that point by 1999, and then the internet bubble burst. And it all came crashing down. I went through 3 rounds of layoffs where I had to lay off team members. And the first round, everyone is they're sad, but it's, well, we gave it our best. The second round is, man, you guys have got to get your act together. It's starting now to be blamed specifically towards management. And the third round, which was very painful, each one I was losing sleep over. The third round, one of the guys that I had to lay off looked across the desk and said, "You enjoy this, don't you?" And to be honest, I was devastated. It was a dagger to my heart. And I immediately went to prayer because I was seeking after the Lord and trying to go deeper in my faith. I was in a bit of a crisis point. It wasn't extreme, but it was testing my faith at a time where I wanted to go deeper. And his comment was an inflection point with regards to my own strength, because I had essentially reached the end of my rope. And when the fourth round of layoffs came, I proposed that I be laid off. that I address the organizational needs, and that I would take a severance package. I recommended that to the CEO who I reported to, and he took me up on that. I then decided that I would take the summer off, spend it with my kids. My oldest daughter was about to go to college. It was her final summer before starting freshman year of college. And I had not taken a summer off since high school. I pretty much worked every summer of every year. As I said, I was driven, I was ambitious, and I was setting out to accomplish goals. So I was very intentional. I had a generous severance package, so I was intentional, and had a great summer. I mean, it was just wonderful. And come August, I started to call the recruiters back again, saying I'm ready to get back in the game. At that time, I was living in Connecticut, just outside of New York City. I was commuting into New York for any of my jobs. The responsibilities that I had included offices in Manhattan. So I was commuting back and forth. And the end of August, the recruiter said, well, just wait till next month. And then come back and we'll get you going, right? It'll be hiring season again. So that was September 2001. And on September 11th, the world changed. And I could walk the World Trade Towers blindfold. I had customers there. I spent quite a bit of time in there. I spent a lot of time in Manhattan. And it was absolutely devastating. It was devastating for the country, but to be in that region that lost so many people and was so impactful, shut down New York City, it was incredibly difficult. And there was no opportunity for work. I mean, there was no even conversation about finding a job at that time. So I decided to extend my holiday into the fall. I actually led a group of teens down into Manhattan in early November. We went down to the Bowery Mission, who had given up their chapel for supplies, and we went down to the Bowery Mission and we organized the supplies, got them in a place that it would be easy for the responders to get access to them. I took them as far as down as you could get in the subway, and then we walked down and we actually saw the smoldering remains of the World Trade Center and how gray everything was throughout Lower Manhattan. And then went and continued to pray for what the Lord had next for me. And I could not find a job. And there was very little opportunity. And for the first time in my life, God showed me that I wasn't in charge. And it was a real revelation to me, because I had moved from one level of responsibility professionally, from one level of responsibility to the next. I just kept moving up the chain. I was successful at most of them. And I expected to continue in that path. And all of a sudden, God slammed the door. And there I was standing there, and I had no real opportunities ahead of me. There was nothing that I could do to change my personal circumstances. So then I had a dream, and I'm not a big dreams and visions guy. It's just part of my makeup. But I had a dream, and it was very clear to me. And this is a little graphic, but in the dream, I was standing entirely naked in the dark. I could not see anything. I was conscious, but I could see absolutely nothing. And I heard God say, take a step. And I went to take a step, and I couldn't. My feet were frozen. And I heard God say it again, take a step. And I couldn't move. I looked down, and I couldn't tell if I was on the edge of a cliff or solid ground, and I could not move. I was frozen. I was shaking. I desired to move, but I couldn't. And then he said the third time, take a step. And I woke up. I immediately realized, you don't trust God. You don't trust God. I could not trust God enough to take that step forward. So here I was, desiring to go deeper in my faith, and yet I really didn't trust God. And because of a very difficult and traumatic childhood, I didn't trust anybody. And that was the beginning of the stripping that God had to do for me to bring me to a point where I was willing to surrender. And I went through ultimately what I call an intentional surrender process. And that intentional surrender process was to lay before God all of the things that I had built, all of the things that I was putting above Him. So I basically said, you can take the house. And we lived at a beautiful home on the beach in Fairfield, Connecticut. I said you could take the kids out of private school. I had 4 kids in a private Christian school. You can take the toys. I had plenty of toys, including I like fast cars. And, you can take everything. You can take the career. Everything is yours. But I asked them, don't take one thing from me, please. Don't take my family. And 8 years later, I woke up one day and I was a pastor turning around a broken church, and I was leading a global missions organization. And I attribute that to my willingness to hand over to God everything that I had built. Now, today I tell men to be very careful about that prayer, because what you don't want to do is get halfway in and decide you're not willing to give it up. You renege on your commitment to God. Because I will tell you that He stripped me of that house. He stripped me of the toys. He stripped me of the career. I no longer had any of those things. And if I had tried to hang on to them, the price would have been very high, because I would have been fighting God to get them back.
So what kind of challenges and struggles did you run into as you laid control down at His feet, and maybe even some of the possessions down at His feet?
God was merciful to me through my surrender process. I really said that I would walk away from the software business that I had built a career in, because I wasn't certain that I could change my behaviors and live a surrendered life in the software business, mostly because I had never done it before. So I wasn't sure that I was capable of it. So I didn't want to go back to the software business, but through circumstances that I won't go into the details, I wound up back in the software business for a period of time, and I was very successful. I filled up our coffers for what happened during the years of unemployment. Refilled the storage grains for what the locusts had eaten, so to speak. So God was very merciful to me. Didn't take away the career immediately. And then it began a process of transition. I became Holy Spirit unsettled, so to speak. I like to say my heart was not settled. So what I attempted to do was to leave the software business and go into a consulting business, helping individuals, primarily in my church, other Christ-centered men who wanted to build Christ-centered businesses. And I came alongside of 2 individuals and were helping them in a consulting capacity. And then one of them was successful, and I stepped away. They didn't need me any longer. And as that happened, I was ending an eldership at one of the larger churches in New England. I was on the elder team when a church who had split came to us and asked if we would help them to revive their church. And we said that we would, as long as you they were willing to come under the authority of our elders, which they did. And then the elders ultimately asked me if I would go up and pastor the church and turn it around. And that was very, very trying. It was a church split. There had been a lot of hurt and resentment that got fostered because of that. And my wife and I stepped into the middle of that. It was enormously difficult. So I'm in the surrendered life. I've been living a life of success. God doesn't take the software business away from me, and all of a sudden I step into a high level of brokenness. And unfortunately, this is a story unto itself. I won't go into all the detail, but I essentially said, God, I've got this. You wait here. I'll report back. And that did not go well. That did not go well. God let me go into my own strengths. And this is one of those things where your earlier questions, how did I, use my own strength? Well, I know how to turn around businesses. So I must know how to turn around a church. And I set out to do exactly that. And I failed and fell flat on my face. The 2 years into it, I had to go back to the elders who were my friends and basically say, I failed. I haven't grown the church. I haven't added hardly anybody to the roster. I don't feel the spiritual dynamic that I had hoped to feel. And they gave me the best advice that I could have received. That advice was, stop. Stop doing what you're doing. Stop using your skills to fill in seats. Stop trying to stare at the financial ledger. And anyone who walks through that door, you invest in their spiritual development. You invest in their spiritual life, and let us worry about all the rest. And it was that time that I surrendered the pastoral role back to God, where it should have been the whole time. And within a year, the church was growing, people were coming to faith, and I was baptizing people. It was an amazing turnaround because of the wisdom and discernment of other men to see what I was doing, to recognize it, and to give me godly advice. Stop depending upon my own skills.
So as you started laying that control down, one, there was a stepping back into it, but what did you find as you laid control at his feet and submitted that completely? What did you find about his response? What did you find about how your relationship with him progressed? What did that look like?
Well, that continues to this very day. That was actually 16 years ago that my wife and I stepped into the pastoral role. It was Father's Day 16 years ago. As I laid it down a couple of years later, and ever since that time, I found that God is faithful. And as I've truly surrendered, and this is daily. This is not something you do and walk away and you're successful. It's a daily surrender. And it's a constant prayerful surrender that says, Lord, show me, don't allow me in my own brokenness to make decisions that affect your kingdom. So I'm still on that journey, the sanctification journey, if you will. I've learned a lot. God's been enormously faithful. I stayed 1 year commuting as a pastor of this church, and then at the same time, I was commuting into New York City and helping a friend turn around another business in New York. That was successful, and I was looking for my next role, and I was praying that I would be able to do it in full-time ministry. I really wanted to transition out of business, and I finally felt like my heart was in the right place, and I was praying to God, if I'm in the right place, lead me to an opportunity to be full time. The church could not afford me full time, so my daughter was home for a summer break from college, as I mentioned, and she got a 2-week engagement filing papers in an office. And one day she had to have an oil change. So my wife dropped her off at work and went back to pick her up so she could get her car. And my wife went inside and she knew the office manager, and she got talking to the office manager and how are things at Project Medsend? And well, we could use some, additional leadership. We're faltering a little bit. And my wife comes back and says, would you ever consider helping Project Medsend? So 15 years ago, this week, I wound up, because of an oil change, stepping into my role at Medsend. I wish I could say that they recognized and identified my incredible skill and giftedness, but it was an oil change.
And how has your life changed now that you're able to recognize when control starts to creep up, and you're specifically able to pinpoint that and lay that at his feet and experience and walk in forgiveness for that?
Well, there's two elements, and part of it is hard for me to gauge, right? So the what first element is I'm getting older, so I'm getting more patient, and they say patience comes with age, and I was never a patient man. I had a job to do, and I wanted to get her done, and I set out to do it. Um, so I'm much more patient, but I hope that patience is grounded in a willingness to wait upon the Lord, to pause and not push forward, not push down doors that He puts up, but rather to wait until the door opens. And that has manifested itself through Medsend. I'm facing a time like that right now, and I have to wrestle with how much of my own self and my own ambition and expectations I need to fulfill versus what's of the Lord. And I try and wait in prayer for Him to respond. I've gotten much better at that, but there are times where I feel like, because I'm responsible in a leadership role, that I do have to exert myself and take steps forward that I'm at times very unsure of. But that comes with the role. If you're going to step into this responsibility, you need to be able to take steps sometimes where you're very uncomfortable.
Can you describe what it's like to walk in power and love and self-control, rather than walking in a spirit of fear in this area?
Oh, yeah, it's, yeah, I don't experience much fear. And the way to avoid that is to really believe and trust, which I have had to learn a lot about. I started telling you that I had trust issues, but I have had to learn how to trust the Lord and to hand it to Him, and be content with outcomes that are not my own. And this is an enormous balance. It's not based on fear. It's more based on responsibility and work unto the Lord, right? So this is a an area of my life where I continue to grow in a leadership role, which is how much responsibility do I have to step into any given situation and help to control outcomes versus to just surrender, hand it to the Lord, and allow kind of, I'll say, a natural flow of progression of events. And this is a tension that I think every Christian leader faces.
That's beautiful. Thanks for sharing, Rick.
You're welcome.
Last question. As we wrap up, can you share who is Jesus to you?
That's an awfully big question. Who is Jesus to me? He's my hope and salvation, right? I mean, it's those are I think kind of a little too much off the cuff, but it's such a big question. I will say Jesus is my only hope. That, and I'm really honest. It's an honest answer that I see no hope outside of Jesus. I am a broken vessel, fully surrendered. It's when Jesus turns and says, do you too believe, or do you want to walk away? And it's like, where else do we have to go, Lord? There is no other truth. And essentially, that's where I am at. It's like I have no other place to go. My only hope is in Jesus.
Well, it sounds like there's the experience of walking and trusting in yourself and trying to control things on your own and realizing where that leads and the road that leads to. And in your experience versus what it looks like to walk and abide in Christ and follow him and seek him and trust him and allow him to be in control and trust him to do what he wants to do. What doesn't matter what area of your life we're talking about. There's a significant difference between those two directions or pursuits.
And a word that you used earlier, fear, defines one of them. When you're doing it in your own strength, you fear that you may not be doing it right. You fear that others may be, breathing down your neck particularly in a competitive, secular world. Versus when you surrender it to God, you have tension. You have to figure out him versus you, and then where's that balance? So that tension doesn't go away, but you don't fear for outcomes.
Thank you for sharing, Rick.
You're welcome. It's been my pleasure. God bless you and those you love.